What life would you love to live? What sorts of relationships would you like to have? What kinds of people would you like in your life? I don't just mean like romantic relationships, but I mean relationships in general. Not only relationships, but what sort of prosperity level would you like to do? Would it be important to you to be able to live whatever experiences you want and need to live without regard to the availability of money? In other words, if you want to eat a particular kind of food at a particular restaurant, or if you want to travel to a particular location, would it be important for you to be able to have that experience regardless of your ability to afford it? Would that be how you define true prosperity? What about your health level? How about abundant energy, the ability to live your life, the ability to carry the children or the grandchildren, the ability to run if you have to, the ability to have a good time? How about the ability to stay awake throughout the day, get up in the morning full of energy? Would that be important to you? Now, what about what you do for a living? And I don't mean work or a job. I mean what you do. Does it matter to you, your vocation? Does it matter whether you do work that it is meaningful to you, that serves others, that help others? Is that important to you? And if so, the collection of those four elements, does that define the life that you would love to live? Because it is possible. Let's talk about that a little bit. There's a problem with that kind of dream life mentality, right? And the problem is that, of course, we would all want that. Of course, you want it. Of course, you've been dreaming about it in secret your whole life. You can remember, all of us can, when you're a child, you never thought that you would live the life that you're living today. We never do. We think that we're going to be some sort of superhero and live some sort of awesome life. You see, when you're a kid, a baby, you think, okay, once I grow up, I'm going to be big and powerful and live an awesome life. But it doesn't quite ever turn out that way, does it? In fact, research shows that most people never unlock their true power. They live a life that is quite mediocre in comparison to the life they could live, or the life of their dreams, which is available to them, but they never quite figure out how to live it. So some people are able to achieve some money, but their relationships don't work out, or other people have awesome relationships, but they cannot make a living. And we never quite seem to figure this thing out, perhaps because of this scarcity mentality. If I get one thing, I got to give up another. The point is, though, that you and I have this unlimited power that if we could only learn to tap into it, and we could actually live the life of our dreams, the life that we dreamed about when we were children. It is actually possible. And one way that I know it is possible is because many people do have it. Not all of us, but many people do have it. And if they can do it, you and I can do it as well. So let's talk about this unbelievable power, this powerful thing that we all have within. Let's begin at the beginning. Think of Moses, the biblical figure. So Moses was said to part the Red Seas, and you can think of that literally or metaphorically. Parting the Red Seas, if the Egyptian army is pursuing you, is a way of saying that he was able to move difficulties aside so that he could get into his freedom and safety on the other side of the ocean. Now, speaking of parting the ocean, opening the Red Seas, so Jesus, as a historical figure, is known to have talked about the ability to move a mountain if only we have a little bit of faith. If you have faith the size of a grain of mustard seed, you could move a mountain. And more recently, we have other people who have displayed some unbelievable levels of power and abilities. You have Lee Iacocca in the 1980s, late 70s, 1980s, who really started the modern CEO, American corporate CEO fashion, in a sense, because CEOs back then used to be very secretive people nobody knew about. And Lee Iacocca started showing up on TV and advertising Chrysler cars and explaining what was going on with the company. And of course, he pulled off a feat that is still studied in business schools by most people, because he was able to turn a Chrysler around. And of course, he wrote a couple of books, and they're available for you to read. Absolutely fascinating story. But even closer to our times. You have people like Steve Jobs, who was able to create a whole phenomenon, not just a company, not just one of the most wonderful companies around in all times, but also an entire culture, an entire phenomenon. And then you have Jeff Bezos with Amazon, which really has an economy much larger than many countries around the world. One company, larger the economy than many, many countries around the globe. And of course, Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook and many other remarkable people, And the question is, the power that these people have displayed and used and put to good use, is that available to you or not? Or is it only available to a selected few people on this earth? Can we learn to tap into that or not? And, perhaps we don't have to be a Lee Iacocca, Jeff Bezos, or Steve Jobs. Perhaps all you have to do is be able to help your child out of drugs, or perhaps save your marriage, or perhaps overcome cancer. You see, in other words, heroism and a fantastic life means something quite different for different people. I only mention these kinds of historical figures and current business magnates only as an example of how high our achievements can go in comparison to most of us. But the same thing would apply to a person who overcomes the odds of cancer, or perhaps getting a child out of a gang. Those are remarkably difficult things. But who can say that that's more or less important or difficult than creating a company the size of Amazon? You see, that is perhaps how you define success, and you deserve it, and you can do it. The power that it would take to save a child or turn your health around, it is the same type of power that can be used to create a company. See, all of these people that I mentioned above had their share of difficulties. Wasn't Moses given up for adoption and the princess picked him up off of a river? Wasn't Jesus' life in peril when he was born? Herodotus wanted to kill all the boys younger than 1 year of age. The family had to flee to Egypt to save the boy's life. How about Lee Iacocca? In his book, he talks about, I think his daughter's name is Mary. She was born with a very fragile health and struggled throughout her life. And so all of these guys, Steve Jobs, wasn't he given up for adoption? And in his book, Jobs, doesn't he talk about how that left an imprint in him that lasted his entire life? And on and on and on. These people who are absolutely remarkable are not any more fortunate than anyone else. They just tapped into a certain power and they've been able to put it to use in a particular direction. You can do the same thing. So if you also have that power available to you, what happened to your power? What happened to you? You see, as I said above, those people have their stories. What is your story? I'll tell you what happened to you. What happened to you was life. Life has that function for all of us. Life's function is to distract us away from our power. Life's function, the world, life itself, has the function of distracting you away from your power so that you learn how to use it more strongly. It is no different from going to a gym to lift weights. When you do that, when you provide your muscles with opposition to movement in the form of lifting a weight, your muscle grows. And so your sense of power and divinity grows to the extent that you overcome the tendency to become distracted away from who you are. So people say, well, I was such a bright young child. What happened? Well, what happened was life itself. That is exactly what life is supposed to do. Attempt to distract you away from who you are. Your job is to overcome that and become even better. All right, so let's get technical for a moment. The mental and emotional environment, and also the physical environment you're exposed to as a child, as an infant, leaves an imprint in a part of your mind that you're not aware of as an adult. That's why we call it the unconscious or the subconscious, meaning we're not consciously aware of those imprints, those energies, those vibrations. Those impressions that we lived as a baby, as an infant, amount to something that we later in life call our self-image. But the self-image is something of which we're not consciously aware, hence the term subconscious. It is a subconscious image. But that subconscious self-image, how we see ourselves, that was impregnated into us during infancy, that self-image becomes the basis for our lives as an adult. And we get into a life that is in auto mode, like automatic control, like an automaton. And the way that works is just like a thermostat at home. The thermostat, the device that controls the temperature in your typical home. The very basic idea of a thermostat, which is the simplest type of automatic control device you can have, you have four pieces, four elements in there. You have a sensor, in this case a thermometer. You have a set point, that's the temperature you want. Then you have a comparator that compares the signal from the thermometer, the actual temperature, to the set point. The comparator generates an error signal. If those two temperatures are different, it actuates the fourth element in the system, which we call the actuator. If the temperature is too high, it turns on the cooling system. If the temperature is too low, it turns on the heating system. So you have four elements there. You have a sensor, you have a set point, you have a comparator, and you have an actuator. Well, when I say that we live our lives in auto mode, we have a sensor as well. That's your nervous system through your five senses. And so you perceive what's going on in your life. You know what's happening with you. You see people. You get certain results. That's your sensor. Collectively, your nervous system senses the environment. Your set point is the self-image I told you about, except that we don't know what it is. It's there, but we don't know what it is. Your comparator is your subconscious mind as well. The self-image is in the subconscious, but your comparator is also. And so between what I'm experiencing and what's stored in my subconscious mind, I generate an idea and I say, well, this is exactly the life I deserve, an awful life or a terrible situation or no money or whatever the case, or maybe a lot of prosperity. You see, we compare those things at the level of the unconscious, and it is going to generate a signal, if you will, that goes into the actuator, which is our decisions, our actions. And so if I'm giving horrible food, which doesn't match what I want to eat, I say no. And I move that away and I go seek better food, you see. The actuator is the part of me that goes get what I want. And so most of us simply live in automatic. It's like, okay, this is what's happening. It's because of the economy, it's because of the government, it's because of this, that, or the other. And we kind of accept what's going on because it matches those images that are stored at the level of the unconscious. And as long as there's a match there, we don't have to do much about it. See, if there's a match between the sensed temperature and the set point at home, that error signal is zero and it doesn't turn on the cooling or the heating. You see, we don't have to do anything about it. Now, when I talk about this auto mode, a lot of people question me. I've been doing this for 24 years, so a lot of people who are not quite as familiar with it, they go, wow, that can't quite be. I'm aware of who I am. I know who I am. A lot of people are not quite aware of this existence of our own unconscious, the fact that there's a big part of me that I don't know about, right? So how about this man? He was born very poor, so he experienced poverty for most of his youth. And that's the imprint, right? That's the set point. Then he immigrates to the United States and gets into a series of businesses and ends up a multi-millionaire. True story. I know the man really well because I worked with him for a while. He accumulated a net worth of $2 million and made one investment that in 6 months caused him to lose absolutely his entire fortune. So this is a man who was smart enough to generate in a few years a net worth of $2 million. And that very same man with the very same wisdom, made it possible for him to lose it all in 6 months. Think about that for a second. Do you see how, and when we worked, it was interesting because he told me, the day he came out of his accountant's office and the accountant confirmed to him, yes, your net worth is in excess of $2 million, that came down into him almost as like bad news. It didn't match his childhood impressions, you see. So within 6 months of the visit to the accountant, his net worth was below zero, to the point where he couldn't afford to pay me. We worked. That man was awesome, by the way. He never paid me. But about 6 months after we worked together, I wasn't expecting to ever see him again. That was the deal that we made. We do a lot of pro bono work. But about 6 months after I worked with him, one day he walks into the office with his wife with a stack of $100 bills and just begins to lay them out on the table, And I said, dude, I think that's enough, It didn't work that much. He says, no, what you did for me, there's no, and he left a stack of hundreds there, That's a man of honor, you see. I never went after him with that, that was the deal that we had. I said, sure, I'm going to help you out. You're a brother. We're going to fix this. And we did. And within 6 months, the man had enough money to walk into the office and lay a stack of hundreds on the desk. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. That power was still in there. He just had a temporary lapse where, his childhood vibrations kind of took over and said, no, this doesn't belong to you. So he got rid of it all. But the intelligence and the ability to make money was still there. So he came right back. How about this woman? She becomes a rebellious teenager, smokes, does a number of different types of substances, grows up, cleans it all up, becomes a really, gets married, has children, has a beautiful home. Everything is, the teenage years are behind her. Everything is perfect now, right? You would think. So now she's with her husband and children at a beach resort and having a great time, and everything is, in her words, perfect. So what does she do? She picks up a cigarette and goes back to smoking, something she hasn't done in 20 years. And the question is, what happened? Clearly, that's not a chemical addiction 20 years later. So she comes to see me, the hypnotist, and we dig into it with hypnosis. And she tells me, of course, I picked up a cigarette. I'm supposed to die. She perceives in the hypnotic state her mom planning an abortion. She later goes back and talks to her mom. Her mom was still alive. And the mom confirms, I'm sorry, it was a very difficult time in my life. And yes, I was planning and attempted an abortion. That woman did perfectly fine. But all she was doing is the moment that she felt really happy and accomplished with her husband and children at the beach, no, I'm not supposed to live and be happy. I'm supposed to die. That's what my mom wants for me. And the cigarette was the closest weapon she had to begin the process of killing herself unconsciously. See what I'm saying here? I'm not saying that every case of smoking is related to that. I'm simply saying in that case, I'm only attempting to show you how our childhood impressions manifest later on, and they confuse us, they befuddle us, because it doesn't make any sense. How about a man whose mother is evidently not very well and becomes really violent? Not only she's extremely physically abusive, but also verbally and emotionally abusive. That man gets married, has a relatively peaceful marriage. That doesn't work for him, so he breaks off that marriage, gets married again. Now his second wife beats him up several times, severely, abuses him, and develops the habit of calling him garbage. So what do you think I did? Well, that felt very familiar. You see, that's my territory. Woman beating me up, calling me garbage. You see, so the more abuse, the more familiar it felt, the more I apologized, the more I wanted, the more I craved, the more I forgave. Do you see how that unconscious comes in? It takes years sometimes to unravel this unless you have a competent hypnotist help you out, because I got to dig into that unconscious memory and you have to change things. Otherwise, it's a long road, friend. These are just 3 examples there, and I think by now you get the point. On the outside, we look like sophisticated adults. We might even make some money. We might have a bunch of girlfriends or boyfriends, whatever the case might be. But on the inside, when you talk deeply, and I've been a therapist for 24 years, but just talking to people in general, you realize that on the inside, most of us are broken and hurting. And there's a reason for that. And that is because we recognize that we're not quite living the life we came here to live. We got to make a change. There are 2 pathways to change. Remember the model of the thermostat, the automatic control system? So you have a set point, you have a sensor, then you have a comparator and an actuator. So if you want to make a change, we have to change the set point, because if you don't change the set point, the comparator is always going to be generating an error signal. And the only way to behave in a way that is different from what is stored in our subconscious mind is to apply a great deal of energy in the form of willpower, a great deal of effort. You have to have a great deal of stamina, and it is possible to succeed, but it's never going to feel comfortable. So I'll give you an example. A person wants to lose weight, but they are famished all the time. They have cravings all the time. So it is possible to lose weight by eating less, but their tendency, their desire, their cravings will continuously suggest that they should eat more. And it is possible not to eat more at a great cost, at a great effort. They have to really get serious about this and really put the lid on these cravings. A huge amount of willpower is going to be required. And if you do that long enough, if you're able to keep that up long enough, and most people can't, that's the truth, and that's why New Year's resolutions only last, a few days, at most a week, because willpower is to the mind what adrenaline is to the body. It's very powerful, but it has a very short duration. And so it runs out. We give up. We don't care anymore. We're hungry. When I eat a cake, whatever the case might be. And so if you want to change your life, yes, you can enforce upon yourself a different behavior until those images change at the level of the unconscious, but that takes a huge amount of effort. And for some people, the effort never goes away. It is always a struggle. Even if they succeed in changing their behavior, they do it at a tremendous cost, at a tremendous level of effort. Now, the alternative to that is to go into your mind and change the set point, change those images that are stored at the level of the subconscious. The only trick with that is that you have to gain access to the subconscious mind first. If you can do that, then we can change those images, and then you're going to naturally behave differently in such a way that it produces different results in your life, but without effort, because it becomes the new norm for you. That is what's stored in that's your new self-image. Those are the new images that are stored there. So now you're trying to match those images. And this is how we help a person quit smoking or lose weight with no effort, no craving, no anger, no anxiety, you see? Because the anxiety comes from the war within us, the war of wanting to do something but not being able to, or vice versa. That's where the anxiety comes from. So if the self-image now matches what I really want for me, there's no internal war, and therefore no anxiety, no cravings, no discomfort. Sure, so how do we change your subconscious self-image? Well, by definition, if it is your subconscious self-image, we have to first gain access to the subconscious mind. There are different ways of doing this. One way, of course, is repetition through the application of willpower over an extended period of time, like months to years. Eventually, the self-image can change. Deep prayer is another way to do it. Deep meditation is one way to do it. And, of course, you always have professional hypnotism as a way of changing, as a way of gaining access to the unconscious mind. But professional hypnotism requires, if you're going to work with a professional hypnotist, you're going to find somebody who has at least 10 years of experience, at the very least. And I'll tell you why. If you go to Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Tipping Point, he explains in detail, I don't have to repeat it here for you, he explains in detail why it takes 10 years of practice for you to master anything. So if you're going to work with somebody who's starting out, they're really experimenting with you. In a sense, they're using you to learn, which it's okay. We all have to start somewhere, but you're not going to get the same results. And you might walk away thinking, oh, hypnosis doesn't work for me, which is terrible because you put the blame on you, and it isn't your fault. It's that you worked with a person who is in training, really not a professional yet. It takes 10 years of practice. So just check out Gladwell's book, The Tipping Point. Now, Daniel Coyle, in his book, The Talent Code, argues that it isn't enough to practice something for 10 years. You need something that he defines as deep practice, which is not the same thing as practice, and he defines exactly what that is. And so it isn't enough for you to call up a hypnotist and say, how long have you been a hypnotist? And say, well, 10 years, 11 years, 12 years. That's because they took a weekend course 12 years ago, haven't really worked with it. That's not the same. It may have been 12 years ago, but they have the equivalent of 6 months of practice. You see, so you need something called deep practice. So for instance, somebody who worked, 24 years, 6 days a week, doing 10 sessions a day, that is somebody who has deep practice and who has a demonstrated track record of success. That is deep practice. And there's a level of experience there that simply cannot be achieved in a few months of practicing with your neighbors and your family members. It doesn't work that way. Now, in his book, Awesome Again, Flavio Ballerini describes what happens to you at a genetic and molecular level when you deep practice something. And I'm familiar with that book because I wrote it. So you can find it on Amazon, #1 bestseller, Awesome Again, and you're going to see why the deep practice, that intense deep practice, creates the ability to produce results for yourself and for others that absolutely looks like magic, but it isn't magic. You see, I have several videos on YouTube, that shows the process of hypnosis, and people ask me, wow, either it's a trick or it looks like magic. And I say, I know, it does look like magic, but I assure you it isn't. So to achieve powerful transformational results through hypnosis, it is the fastest way to do it, more than learning how to pray deeply or meditation. The fastest way to do it is to work with a professional hypnotherapist, as I defined it. But even then, you're going to need a few months of regular sessions to get to the bottom of it, because the mind is like a labyrinth and it has many layers of defenses, and the mind is continuously trying to plug the gaps, fill the holes, and restore the self-image that was installed in it during infancy. Just as the body is always looking to maintain homeostasis and keep everything in check, the mind is doing the same thing. So you do a session today, you make a slight change in the self-image, it tends to slip back because the mind wants it a certain way. And so you have to do it a certain way, and it takes a few years to figure out what that way is. But if you do it right with professional hypnosis, you're going to have the fastest results of any other possibility. And yet, it's not immediate. So you're looking at months of hypnotherapy at an office, or, a retreat type of situation, such as the retreats at Orion Retreats. People often ask us, but what is so special about the retreats you run and organize? Well, what's special about them is that we can achieve months worth of therapeutic transformation in days of retreats. And the reason why we can do that is because we help you isolate yourself entirely, completely from your day-to-day activities and concerns. So by definition, it's a retreat. There are no phones, no computers, you're isolated, and you're focused from morning to night only on you. Now, in order to maximize the transformational experience, we take care of every detail you can imagine. At most you may have to bring a toothbrush, but really nothing else. We take care of everything. We take care of travel arrangements, transportation, lodging, food, everything, all your therapeutic time and exercises, even the supplies you need, down to a pencil or pen, paper, whatever you need, we provide everything, because doing it that way, you don't have to think about anything other than you and your transformation. And so we remove all of those concerns from you. That's why it's so special. Now, people tell us, well, I think there's something else special about it. In addition to not having any concerns and getting powerful results, we also have something else with you guys. We feel like we're being treated like royalty, we're pampered, and we're having a great time building awesome friendships. So yeah, that might be a benefit as well. But the reason why we're there is really for deep, profound personal transformation. So people, when I describe it to them, people ask me, well, what about the cost? This must be astronomically expensive. You take care of every detail. You include transportation, food, lodging. This must be really expensive. You'd be surprised to discover that it isn't. It's actually less expensive than doing the equivalent amount of therapy at an office. When you compute like travel time to and from the office, wait time in the lobby, when you compute your time into it, you're going to realize that a retreat, you invest about a week into it, but in a week, you change, you get something done, and that transformation lasts because we make sure that it lasts, it holds, it stays, because we actually get to the bottom of certain things. And so when you look at the overall cost of our own dysfunctions, and when you put it all together, a retreat is extraordinarily inexpensive. In fact, I've written papers on this, I've shown this in many different ways. It is the highest return on investment you can make. The investment with the highest return you can possibly make is a retreat, because you are your only means of production. By you being better, not only will you automatically make more money because people just do when they feel better, but also you're going to waste less money in terms of lost productivity, in terms of depression, in terms of sickness and illness. In other words, I'm not saying that you don't ever get sick again. I'm just saying that you tend to feel better about yourself, and that makes you absolutely more productive. And you also end up wasting less money in terms of shopping for things you don't really need and hoarding and stuff like this. You take care of all that stuff, and so you become a more productive human being. So when you look at the overall return on your investment, nothing beats a retreat. And the question is, how can you join us for one of our retreats? Well, we have a whole lot of details about each retreat that we have coming up on our website, which is www.oriontravels.net, N-E-T. You can send me a WhatsApp message, 305-505-3279. If you have like an immediate question, send me a WhatsApp. But really, the retreat that we have coming up now in November to Colombia is going to be absolutely fantastic. We only have 5 spots available, 5 spots left, that's it. And we really want to take a beautiful group, but there are only 5 spots left. And, if this transformation, if you're ready for this kind of personal transformation, this may just be what you've been waiting for and looking for. So getting to the website, take a look at information, find out if this is for you. If you have any questions, in order to save time, send me a WhatsApp message right away and I'll get back to you fast so that we can determine together if this is right for you. All right? Thank you.